Hi, everybody. This is Mark Graban from KaiNexus, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's webinar titled Solutions for Sustaining an Improvement Program. This is going to be presented by Chris Burnham of Wright Medical, and I'm really excited with everything he's going to share today. So I'm going to keep my introduction of Chris brief, help him maximize his time. I've known Chris for a while now. He can correct me if I'm wrong. I may have first learned about Chris when he was the creator of a great podcast series called the Lean Leadership Podcast. It's been on hiatus, but it's available out there in all the podcast directories, and I definitely recommend you check that out. But Chris has worked not only at Wright Medical, where he is today, but he's been in a number of companies, including Coca-Cola, XPO Logistics, and Celestica Inc. So I'm really excited that Chris is here and that we found a way to make it work out. And so with that, let me hand it over to you, Chris.
All right. Thanks, Mark. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to invest in yourself and becoming a better improvement leader or be able to contribute more to the improvement community. Just a little bit about myself. Everybody recognizes that in improvement work, nothing goes as planned. That's probably more evident to me today than anything else, because here I am sitting in the Delta Lounge giving a presentation by telephone instead of in my office as I'd planned. But I think today what I want to make sure is that we talk a little bit about improvement, talk about the improvement culture. And most of what we do that's effective is not the scientific side, but it's the soft side or the people side that's important. You can have the best technical skills in the world, but if you can't relate to people, it creates a challenge for you. I have a little bit different background from what you would traditionally see in the continuous improvement world. My degree is actually in criminal justice, and I use it every day, believe it or not. I use it from being able to talk to people from different walks of life and different ethnic and socioeconomic backgrounds. I have learned to gather data from my own eyes and not trusting the facts that someone else gives me, but trust but verification. And just having a disposition towards helping people. All of these things are things that you learn in a criminal justice program, and I use every day. So I do have a small disclaimer that I need to put out there. I've had the benefit of working with some great people and some great organizations, but the content and the views expressed today are mine and mine alone. And they don't necessarily represent those that I may have been associated with personally or professionally. So now that we have that out, there's a slide mark that says about me, and it's got some pretty cool pictures on it. So I am just a little bit about me. I live in Memphis, Tennessee, and I have a great family. I got a beautiful wife, Jennifer, and two kids, one of which is about to start driving here in a little bit. So that will test your patience more than anything else. I'm an avid NBA fan, and the Memphis Grizzlies are kind of my home team here. I'm a dog lover. I've got 3 great dogs here, and that they're the 4-legged children in our home. But they're all rescues. Nobody was bought. Nobody was bred. It's a matter of giving dogs a home. We're actually active in the Street Dog Foundation here in Memphis. That's kind of how we give back. If I can be lost for 4 hours or so, you will find me on a pond with a kayak chasing fish. I figured out years ago that if I'm in the woods with a golf club, my blood pressure goes up. If I'm in the woods with a fishing pole, my blood pressure goes down. Up in the top right corner, there's a piece of advice that my mentor gave me at the beginning of my career. And this index card has kind of followed me around everywhere I go. It ends up up on the wall in every office that I've had, but it says, you cannot add simplicity in, you have to take complexity out. And I think there's no truer maxim when it comes to improvement work. And if you had to sum up what I do for a living, you'll see the airborne soldier jumping out of plane, but there's one small step that he missed. Now his training is going to tell him what he needs to do to save himself. But sometimes we miss the little things, and the little things are important. And what I do for a living is I help make sure that teams operate at their personal and collective best. If you had to describe what I do for a living, I make sure that the static line is on the line and that everything goes as possible whenever possible. So in continuous improvement work, next slide here, Mark, please. We often find ourselves playing different roles or different positions, and there's no one set position that we play every time. But some of these, in some instances, we may be the leader that everyone else is looking to for advice or guidance or direction. And other times we may be a learner where we're trying to build skills or gain knowledge, or even more importantly, grasp the situation and truly understand the challenge that we're facing at the time. Other times we have to be an advocate. I like to think that people that do what we do are advocates for the process and advocates for the people. So advocacy can be seen in a couple different ways, but I think advocacy is probably best described as seeing the truth and speaking the truth at every opportunity. And then as we look forward, we often play the role of coach. And by coaching, you set an example. Coaching is not telling. Coaching is not directing. Really good coaching is asking good questions that change the way that people think or change the way that people, the prism through which they view a process. So really the best coaches that I've seen out there that I've had in my life and that I have the benefit of working alongside and networking with they ask really good questions that provoke thought. I recently I was at a conference and a friend of mine were looking at a group of people, and he mentioned, 10 years ago, we were the young guys at these types of conferences. And I said, yeah, I know. He goes, now we're the old guys. But the way that you get old in this business is not by telling more people or stopping in more places. Really, it's by gaining experiences and learning how to ask better and better questions. So the next slide. I think one of the things we have to establish up front is realizing that we serve different constituents from a continuous improvement standpoint. If you are a representative or a leader of a continuous improvement program, you are, for lack of a better term, an advocate and an ambassador for your companies or your organization's change culture. And being able to quickly and comfortably talk to people from all different venues is something that's important with this. And serving that culture, you need to understand the environment. And I think Rich Sheridan, who wrote Joy Inc., he probably summed this up best in a talk that he gave. But he says, essentially we're all climate control devices or HVAC units, and we have to pump out fear, filter out ambiguity, and pump back in safety and comfort so that people feel comfortable sharing. You may have to do that with somebody that's working on the front line that's closest to the work. You may have to do that with a boardroom with executives, with people that maybe they don't understand improvement in a sense, in its deepest sense. So you have to kind of play the role of learner learning what's important to them, but also advocate and trying to demonstrate the values and the things that are important to them and the behaviors from a culture standpoint. You may be somebody that's been in your role. You may be working or serving someone who's been in their role for 30 years and has advanced academia, or you may have somebody that's just starting out in their career. But I also think it's important that we remember that every bit of improvement begins and ends with the customer, and that customer may be somebody that's externally that's a retail consumer. In healthcare, they may be the patient, but internally we have customers as well that are the downstream processes that rely upon us getting things done right the first time, and not accepting passing something down from that's wrong, whether it's part, product, or information. So today I want to kind of share with you some of the experiences that I've had as far as some pitfalls that can put your continuous improvement program at risk, These are the types of things that it's a lot like. Oftentimes, it's not a big meteor that hits you; it's a small splinter that you leave unattended, and it becomes infected and festers, and then everyone else is afraid to get a splinter, and you end up having to do more work than you need to. So, think in terms of managing those splinters. Is making sure that you're tending to problems when they happen. And here are a couple common ones that have stuck out. I'm going to share with you my experiences that have helped me and benefit. I want to point out I'm not perfect. I still face challenges every day, and I'm learning just like you are. But I wanted to share some of my experiences with you to kind of help inform some of the choices and things that you do in the future. So the first slide there is around poor communication. And Karen Martin, in her book, The Outstanding Organization, which is a great book, by the way, it talks about lack of clarity and how that breeds chaos and confusion. And oftentimes, lack of clarity doesn't show itself or manifest itself as, something that's completely wrong. It's usually just a small detail that's missing or a small detail that's not completely understood. Or you walk away from something and there's still a cloud of ambiguity around what's supposed to happen out next. You hear the term "somebody needs to take care of this problem." Well, somebody doesn't work here. If you see it, you own it until you pass it to somebody that can take it from you. But I think also the biggest challenge is failure to understand or properly grasp the current situation. So there's some things that you can do that are fairly easy in regards to this that will help you mitigate the confusion sometimes. I think you need to practice asking better open-ended questions. What I would suggest with this is find a partner, find somebody that you can trust, and just practice asking good questions and give real and honest feedback. I think open-ended questions provoke thought, but if you give simple yes or no questions, it's like taking a multiple choice test. You're not demonstrating any long-term knowledge, and you're not provoking a thought. You're just provoking, do I choose left or right, A or B, or yes or no? I would also suggest documenting tasks using a clearly defined system. However you choose to do that, whether it's using a wiki, if in some cases I've seen, if it's using documenting an email with OneNote, with meeting notes, and after every note. Also, I would make sure to summarize things via email. But or I would hey, look, I'm a KaiNexus consumer as well, and the KaiNexus system has been really helpful for us as far as communicating, collaborating, and keeping track of what needs to be done in order to be able to effective and move the needle the direction we want to. Also, I would emphasize write stuff down. In a day and age with we've got iPads, iPhones, tablets, laptop computers. We've got we can take notes voice recorded with our phones or whatnot. I still walk around with a good old fashioned paper and pen planner, and there's two reasons for that. The first one is it's a system that works for me. It's easy to take out in different environments, whether I am in a manufacturing environment or an office environment. I'm not limited to technology, but I also think there's a deeper connection to when we pick up a piece of paper and a pen and we put the pen to paper and apply our ideas. The other thing is that when you're talking to somebody and they bring something up to you and you stop to take a moment to write it down, you're certifying that what's important to them is important to you. And so that unspoken behavior of writing that out when they're right in front of you is powerful. Repeat back for confirmation. This is we all learn this along the way when we're learning about feedback, but somehow we skip over it or gloss over it. So a simple way to do this is just repeating back. So you'd say, Mark, just so I understand what you're saying, so I'm clear and I understand. You indicated that we were going to have to do the podcast or the webinar a little bit differently today because the situation's beyond your control. Is that right? And just that simple confirmation will, it demonstrates back to Mark that I'm listening, but it also crystallizes and clarifies the idea in your mind. The other thing is assume there is no agreement until agreement is confirmed. And this is another thing. It may seem small, but if you miss it, it hurts. It can actually impede the progress there. And just confirmation. Hey, I want to make sure we have agreement on this. These are the things that these folks are going to do, or this is the next step, or this is what we've agreed to take on. And just get that verbal confirmation from folks around the room. And the last thing, I alluded to this a little bit in my introduction with my criminal justice background, but don't get information filtered from someone else. Whenever possible, get the information straight from who provided it. Because of the pace that we work at in the world today, and we're moving so quickly, and we try to convince. Every day we see people throughout the globe that try to take complex thoughts and distill them down to 140 characters. Don't allow that to creep into your improvement program. Make sure that you're getting accurate information from the source from that standpoint. So that covers communication. The next step is not using metrics and process behavior charts. And the challenge here is that an absence of clear measurements and targets that define success can actually have you kind of running around. It's kind of like going on a journey without a map. You don't know which direction is the direction that you should be heading. But the other piece here is making sure that teaching data-driven decision-making. So you want to be able to tie the things that you do and the experiments that you run to the metric so that you can understand how its effect is on the metric. And so what I found is you want to be clear about what the targets are. Write them down. Be clear about what your challenge is. Use the right chart for the right measurement. There's a great book out there for folks. It's called The Back of the Napkin by Dan Rome. And in that book, he talks about whatever idea that you're trying to convey. There's a different type of illustration that you want to use. But, if you're trying to show a trend of an output over time, you don't need to use a bar chart. You need to use a process behavior chart or an SPC chart. And I found that in my personal experience that when you do that, it breeds thinking. Now, when something is outside of a limit, you can ask a question that challenges it and says, "Hey, why? What happened here? What do we understand? Do we have an assignable cause for what happened here?" I've also seen teams that now that they're using them, the dialogue is better between the team because they'll say, "Hey, look, we have 4 process points in a row that are consecutive that are closer to a limit than closer to the average. What's happening here? Let's go see. Let's go learn." So with that, you're creating an environment where targets are visible and people are learning. I'll also tell you that by posting your metrics, you increase the general level of knowledge of everybody in the area. And times where work gets interrupted with having to give status reports, now you can just simply point them to the chart, and the metrics that are there that are important are clearly visible. So I'm not the metric and process the metric and measures of success expert on the call today. That's my co-host. But I would tell you that you want to make sure that when you put metrics out there, don't get caught in vanity metrics. And vanity metrics are things that look good or feel good, but they really don't mean anything. So that can be number of people trained, or it can be number of near misses, or that didn't result in an assignable cause, or there's lots of them out there. Usually you can spot a vanity metric because you can't make a decision based upon what you see, and there's not a clear target as well. And so in the next chart, you see I've got an example of an SPC chart here, and you've got an upper control limit and a lower control limit and an average limit, and that thinker is the person who we serve. And we want to be able to ask what happened here, what changed, what's different here, because when you understand that, you get better process knowledge, gives you better process control, and that's why they call it statistical process control. The next problem that we have is next slide please, is not locking in improvements with training. So the problem here is typically you have an improvement and it's realized, but you don't retrain everyone to the new standard and performance degrades. I think the easiest way to describe this is to call, it's entropy. And entropy is the natural state of processes to degrade into chaos. And that's what happens when you don't seal in the new standard, when you don't confirm and make sure and I guess put your new improvements in a state where they're concrete for the next improvement to build off of. Right. So I know this sounds rudimentary and basic, but a lot of us fail to do this. Is document the new standard. TWI does a great job with job instruction and how we break down the job, the essential elements, but then looking at the job methods process of challenging each step that's broken with job methods. It's who's the best person to do this? When is this the best time to do this? Who is most qualified? Where should this work be done? When should this work be done? And sometimes it may seem like a little bit of overkill, but one of two things is going to happen when you break your elements down like that. You're either going to confirm that they're in the right place, or you're going to unlock an opportunity to move them to a better place. And with improvement work, everybody on this call knows it's not about perfect. It's about better, right? We just want to get better every day. So the other thing you want to make sure is when you do new training is confirm that the teacher has taught and the learner has learned. I'm the son of a former professor of vascular surgery, and the way that he taught was with data. Everybody has to have data. But the other thing is that, much the same way he was instructed is it's see one, do one, and teach one. And that the learner has learned and the teacher has taught when the learner can teach back what they've acquired from the teacher. So that's important. And then people we're all naturally selfish, and that's normal. But to serve that selfishness, you have to confirm to people why the new path is important to the individual and to the team as a collective. And the last thing I'd ask is don't get sucked into the path of being the process police. If you're simply looking to punish people when they're not following your process, then there's a training gap. There's a problem there, and you need to go understand that and address that before you try to move forward to your next advancement. So then the next slide is, and this is important. I talked about how you have to have a personal connection with people, but a lot of the work that we do is soft work, and the problem statement here is simply you can't challenge and get growth if people do not believe that you have their best interests in mind. I don't think that needs any clearer explanation, but I guess the best source that's helped me with this is that's not me. Sorry. This is what happens when you're in a background. So the challenge here is that the best resource I've had is Kim Scott. She wrote a book called Radical Candor, and in that Kim has worked for Sheryl Sandberg at Facebook, and she's worked at a couple different tech companies that you would benefit from. And in her book, she doesn't just tell you how to act or how to build out this framework, but she's built a framework that helps understand that based on her failures and her successes, that the framework is simple. You have to have a high level of care personally in order to be effective with a high level of challenge directly. All right. So, if you don't care about people personally and you challenge directly, then it just comes off as obnoxious aggression. Right. So, the degree in which you can be effective from challenging is directly tied to how tight your personal connection is to the people that you mean. So what I mean by personal connections is don't get creepy, don't get you got to respect boundaries, but get to know the people that you're working with today. Get to know what's important to them. You can't just start out by saying, "Hey, Mark, what's happening with you today?" All right. You have to build that through time with rapport. And I guess the best way that you start with this is to share first. So if If you want to spend some time to get to know people, you need to share things with them. It can be something as simple as having pictures of your family in your desk, and to talk about your family. Then other people will talk about their family if they feel comfortable doing it. You can talk about the challenges that you're taking on at work. You can talk about your goals. There's a great book, that John Dewar wrote out there. That's I won't say it's Measures That Matter, but in it he talks about objectives. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's called Measure What Matters. Sorry.
Measurement. Perfect. Thank you.
Measure What Matters.
And Dewar's book. In Dewar's book, he talks about posting your objectives and your key results. The reason that you do that is so other people can see what's challenged for you and tie their objectives and key results in a way to help you. It's a great book. I didn't put it in my notes at the end, Mark. If we can add that would be great. But at the end of the day, we're a community, and a community is built up by people that are interrelated and they depend upon one another. And you can't do that just as a stone pillar sitting there and not accepting any input or being able to give any output. You have to be part of the network and part of the community. And so the next slide here is not effectively separating the work from the worker. This kind of ties in with the care person, not having a personal connection is, but the challenge here is when we challenge results or outcomes, our natural default language ties the individual to the result. And sometimes we do it without meaning to. Sometimes it's unintentional, but it's the type of thing that if you allow it to happen, it can absolutely sabotage any level of personal connection that you have with people. And it can also set your improvement program back. So you need to be intentional about the words you use. Guys, you want to practice the presentations you give, and you want to practice the language that you use, and have somebody that can act as a second coach that observes you when you're giving these presentations, or somebody that can give you feedback and say, hey, you want to use this word instead of this word, or hey, I thought when you did this, it was a little gray as far as getting into tying the person to the result. You may want to go back and clean that up with a private conversation. But some simple, easy ways is you want to tie results, talk to the results charts or outcome together with people. That's what I love about whenever you put a chart up or a value stream map or a process flow diagram, you're solving a problem. Naturally, your body language as you get side by side with that person and you're looking at the problem together versus sitting across the table from them, and it's directly, hey, Mark, I'm challenging you, not your idea. But you want to make sure that you challenge the process and not the person. I think everybody at this point has heard the maxim: easy on the people, hard on the process, and no truer words have been spoken. But also, make sure that you speak in a language of empowerment. Make sure that you speak in a language that encourages people. Go out of your way to recognize someone whenever you have an opportunity, and that will help out a lot. Goes back, if you have a high personal connection with somebody, then you can challenge more aggressively and more directly. And so this isn't something easy to learn. It takes some time, it takes some effort, but this is one of those things you want to pay attention to. So the next countermeasure or the next challenge we want to face is failure to make results visible. And the problem is people are often not aware of what improvement teams are doing to solve problems. And again, back to the sense of community. If people aren't aware, they can't contribute, and they can't challenge, and they can't improve. So what I would suggest is make the problems that you're working on visible. I think storyboards, huddles, charts with putting those in a place that they're visible, it certifies that they're important, and it also it invites feedback and invitation. You want to celebrate success when it's important. That's one of the first things that is in the TWI and job relations. It's celebrate and give praise at the right time. And you want to be intentional about giving praise. I'll tell you, Mark and I were actually talking about this before the webinar, but in terms of giving praise, make it a point in every interaction that you have to demonstrate, in a visible way through word or action, that you appreciate the contributions of somebody in that area. You want to be an ambassador of joy. You need to make sure that you give somebody kudos every chance you get, and anywhere you're at. And it's contagious. When you do it, other people will see it and they'll do it too. You want to keep the main thing, and that's what happens when you have results visible. If people can't get distracted into the small subset of a small problem that doesn't really affect everyone. And so when you have metrics that matter and measures of success in a visible way, you're able to point back to that and ask, okay, what you're proposing, how does this affect what we've said is important to the group? And so that helps. That what it does is it helps you keep the main thing in front of the eyes that matter most. For KaiNexus users, I have found that building dashboards for leaders in their organizations and making the results that matter visible on a dashboard, and then setting up a email subscription that emails it to them once a week or at whatever frequency they want it based. It can drive engagement, and by making your results visible and making the problems that you're working on visible, you will get a lot more support that comes out of that. So, and I guess to bring it all to closure here, the next slide, it says improvement should be about engagement, and the results are a natural byproduct. So what I mean by engagement is, again, with the sense of community, when you're building a continuous improvement program, it's not a bunch of projects. It's not a bunch of tasks. It's not a bunch of metrics. It's a bunch of individuals that have free and creative thought and differing views and opinions and different ways to see the world. And the collection of that manifests itself in the culture that you build from a continuous improvement standpoint. So the people are the roots. The people are what builds your program, grows your program, sustains your program, protects your program. And so if you focus on engagement with those people in a positive way, and you're teaching, learning, growing, and you're making sure that, at the beginning of the slide, I had those 4 different roles that you play at different times, whether you're a coach or a leader or a learner or an advocate. If you focus on making sure that you're in the right role at the right time in the right place, the results are a natural byproduct. And a group, consulting group I saw recently, one of their maxims is if you focus on the people, the numbers will come. But if you focus on the numbers, the people will go. So that's it in a nutshell. I apologize for not being in a position where I could take a lot of questions from a phone standpoint because of unplanned work travel. But if you have a question, or if you have a comment, or if you have an experience that you think can benefit the group, I would ask that you share it. And Mark will talk a little bit about that. Mark, is there anything that you think I need to clean up, or any points you want me to expand upon in the next minute or so?
I think you need to make your flight. So thank you for making this happen today, even though the circumstances for you weren't ideal. I appreciate you sharing some of your thoughts and reflections and experiences. So we'll figure out how to do the follow-up Q&A. So let me know when you have some time, Chris. We'll share that with everybody via email. So if you want to drop off, I'm going to make a few announcements.
Okay. Just the last thing I want to say is thank you. The improvement, continuous improvement community really is a community, and it's built up of people by you and that are on this call, and the people that we work with. And I'm grateful to be able to be a part of this community. I'm grateful for everything that folks here have given me, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to give back. So thank you. And with that, I'm going to drop off.
All right. Thank you, Chris. And he also provided a list of resources and books that he mentioned during the talk here. John Doerr, Doerr, his book, Measure What Matters, is a really interesting read as well. So just want to make a few announcements, and again, thank everybody for being here. Future webinars. If you are a KaiNexus customer, the next KaiNexus training team office hours is coming up on June 20th. And the next presentation style webinar that is open to all is going to be presented on July 18th. It's going to be presented by Nick Shonsky. He's a continuous improvement specialist at the Standard Group, and his talk is going to be titled something like Capturing and Managing Improvement Opportunities. Nick, like Chris, both of their organizations are KaiNexus customers, and Nick is going to share not just about how they use KaiNexus, but how they engage people in improvement and how important that is. I want to invite you also to check out our on-demand webinar library. You can find that. There's a link on our website, kainexus.com/webinars. Would invite you to check out our blog, or I should say 2 blogs. If you go to blog.kainexus.com, we have kind of a general public blog, and then we have a separate customer blog where we talk about new features and things that are of more interest to KaiNexus customers. We also have a podcast. We will publish the audio of Chris's webinar today and the follow-up Q&A in the podcast feed. So if you're a podcast listener and you want to make sure you don't miss out on the Q&A, you can subscribe to the podcast in all of kind of the usual places. And if you have other questions, Chris mentioned before we started the webinar, if people want to email him, you can do that. His email address is here on screen, his personal email. You can go ahead and submit questions via the question box, and you can also follow up with me, mark@kainexus.com, if you have other questions for Chris to address. So I appreciate his presentation today. Thanks to Chris for mentioning my book, Measures of Success. I hope those of you on the webinar who are KaiNexus customers are using the control chart functionality that's within our software. If you have any questions about the methodology, you can reach out to me, or if you have questions about the technology, you can reach out to your KaiNexus contact. So with that, again, we will end a little bit early today. I want to thank Chris for battling through what was a bit of a fire drill this morning. He meant it when it wasn't his fault that he had some last-minute work travel come up, but I think it was better for him to do a slightly abbreviated session, even with a bit of airport noise, instead of having to cancel. So with that, I want to thank everyone for attending. I hope you'll join us on future webinars. On behalf of the team at KaiNexus and on behalf of our presenter, Chris Burnham, this is Mark Graban saying thank you and see you next time.